although you look much younger and fitter than I am, I have to say I've lived in Hong Kong for about half that length of time, so I can't comment. But what I will say to you is that I used to live in Melbourne, and just before I came I had a wonderful example of power sector reliability. 5 o'clock in the morning, getting up, have a shower, get to work. Actually, I live on the mains network, but off the water supply network, and I get water through a pump from a storage tank. Got the shampoo on, got the soap on, power cut, no water. Got to go to work, get in a car covered in soap. Not a very thrilling prospect. I have to say, since I've been in Hong Kong, I've never had anything like that, and I don't have to worry about it. I have to talk to other colleagues, maybe TC or CW, about perhaps their longer term experience, but I think some considerable time ago. If I ask people in this room, how many of you have ever had an electricity outage at work or at home, which is down to the power companies, not the local equipment in your building, down to the power companies? Please put your hands up now. Somebody from the IPP, the only person perhaps who's had that experience. Right, thank you. So that's a pretty low percentage.
2 seconds. Are you talking when electricity takes out something is not lightning takes out the electricity by blowing equipment along?
No. I was just talking in my previous experience, because of Australia. I live in a remote area. We don't have mains water, so you can't pump the water. But I guess the point I make is that the reliability in Hong Kong is of an exceptional quality, and our life depends on that. And I know comments have been made about, oh, Macau's the same or whatever, but Macau's a little bit different. It's much smaller than Hong Kong. The reliability in Macau may be pretty good, but the implications, if it were not to be good in Macau, are very different if it were not to be good in Hong Kong. We might have 90 or 100,000 people underground on the MTR at that moment. We have 60,000 lifts in operation in Hong Kong. How many firemen have we got to go and get them out? If it's 35 degrees outside, some of them won't make it. So we really need to think about the impact as well as the likelihood of the occurrence. In risk, you think about both. Looking at, does government have a preference for option 1 and 2, I'm going to defer to the man on my left. The other question, which was interesting, which is the source of gas. I think that's a very fair point. We talk about emissions in terms of air. We talk about emissions in terms of CO2. We should also think in terms of the other environmental issues. So Donald has mentioned that in CSG there's a huge amount of hydro, and I think one of the earlier speakers talked about the impacts of large hydro. Coal. How many miners in China die every year? A considerable number. You also have to think about in terms of nuclear. People are concerned about nuclear, I understand that, but I think we had some figures earlier on from Robert about the impact of Fukushima. So no solution is perfect. And I actually think what served Hong Kong pretty well in the past is having a mix of fuels. And that's not something I want to see us move away from too much. And the final question, which is government policy to open up the market? Maybe I'll just share something with you. I moved here from Melbourne. Melbourne has an open market for electricity and in fact for gas. Now, if you take the Australian market, it is actually very competitive. The switching rates for consumers are amongst the highest in the world. But the Australian market today has a carbon footprint which is much higher than Hong Kong's. It has reliability which is much worse than Hong Kong's. It has tariffs in Sydney that are more than twice those of Hong Kong. So we really need to keep the issues separate. What is it we're talking about? My understanding, the objectives of the paper, Tim, were about how do we achieve better air quality, how do we actually get a lower carbon footprint for Hong Kong. So the market model doesn't necessarily define the outcome. Other factors are far more important. So I would suggest that these are separate issues. They're interlinked, but they're separate issues. The exam question today is how do we achieve better air quality, how do we lower the carbon footprint in Hong Kong? And whether you have this type of market model or that type of market model isn't going to make much difference.
Thank you, Jim. Dr. I think it's your turn.
Sure. Jim, it so happened that I'm lucky enough to have spent a couple of years in Switzerland, and then I think it's some important years also from some neighboring countries. I couldn't recall a single sort of just an incident, so I shouldn't be. I don't think that we should be too worried about having sort of power coming from neighboring countries, or also electricity import in general. Now, perhaps I will start with the sort of market opening. That questions about what would be the future direction that we should be heading for. Is the government sort of minded to open up the market? That, I have to confess, this is the subject of another separate review, and we are going to sort of launch another public consultation exercise on the market development after 2018. Now that also explains why we can't say very much in the present consultation document. Now, as you will appreciate, we will have to sort of discuss with the two power companies as to what market structure that we should go for after 2018. And that will be some sort of a very lengthy, I would imagine, lengthy and protracted negotiations. But these two issues, the post-2018 market development and this field mix, are closely interrelated. And I don't think, and I would not agree with my friend, saying that they should be separate. Yeah, I think if someone would love to see that as a separate exercise, they will be a sort of, as I said, separate consultation. But these two issues are closely interrelated, and that's why we believe that it is important right now that we launch this consultation on field mix, which in a way will pave the way for the coming review on the post-2018 market development. And we have also mentioned it here very clearly in the consultation document that it will provide some important pointers and parameters for us to conduct future review. Now let's say that electricity import under option 1, that will call for greater interconnectivity with the mainland grid. Now, some of the comments that you heard today about the risk, the reliability issues and things like that, that will sooner or later, I mean, if down the road we are going to open up the market, if the community really want that, we would have to face the same issues anyway. So I would urge you to sort of take those issues into consideration in a sort of in a wider context and in the perspective as to whether down the road we should be heading for more competition. Now, I think that Jim, we've heard you, of course, very key comments as to whether there will be any benefits in terms of having more competition to the market. But I think that is an issue, a very controversial issue that we would want the community to further debate on down the road when the other consultation document is out. So, but unfortunately, that will still be under me. So, I will still be subject officer. So, about the cost, Johnny has mentioned about whether it should be more specific and more elaborated in our calculations. We have been actually struggling as to what kind of information that we should put in the consultation document as far as the cost is concerned. Now, you can imagine that it is as I said, this whole exercise is more like a planning exercise. We're talking about 10 years. Some people are saying that it's too short a horizon. We should, go up, take a longer view, have some vision. But for now, as I said, 10 years is a planning horizon. Now, it would be quite difficult actually for us to predict with any degree of certainty about its exact tariff implications. So we have mentioned in the document right now that what we can say is that the cost implications of these two options are more or less the same. Not the actual tariff implications. The actual tariff implications will be subject to a lot of different factors, like the sales of electricity in a particular year, the booking or the depreciation of different assets and things like that. So right now we simply cannot predict with any degree of certainty about the actual tariff implications. But the cost, in terms of cost, we have of course done a lot of calculations internally based on a set of different assumptions. And what we have been telling the public is that these two options are more or less the same. Now, the question is whether you trust the government or not. Whether you want to know all the assumptions, all the detailed assumptions that we have used, show me the figures, show me the assumptions that you got. Now, the problem that we have, why we can't do that, is that, for one, some of the issues, some of the information that we got is commercially sensitive. So there is a limit as to how far we can go. But as far as the message is concerned, I mean, what is the most important message that we want to put across is that price here, if you compare these two offers, price here is not the key consideration because they, in terms of their unit cost, they are more or less the same. Now, of course, as I said, after all, it's a matter of whether you believe the figure, believe this message or not. And we do have some restrictions and limitations as to how far we can go. So, not sure whether, okay. One final point about this, whether the government is adopting or is having any preference over option 1 or 2. You will see that we have been sort of saying a lot about option 1. The reason being is that, with lots of comments from commentators from the two power companies and also some from different experts about option one. And it is perfectly understandable. It's something new. It's untested. We are asking people to try something new. We are suggesting that perhaps that we should sort of step out of the comfort zone a little bit, try something new arrangement, whether it is possible for us to do so. So lots of attention and focus has been on option one, but that doesn't mean the government is taking side. I have to say once again that we are taking an open position. I have actually considered that as one of my slides, but anyway, you just take my word. We are taking a very open position. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I remember that slide. Now, anyone from the panel actually also want to respond to the questions? Prentice.
Sure. Actually, I just want to follow up on the source of the gas. Yeah. Actually, TC mentioned that the gas supply won't be a problem in the coming future. However, it seems a little bit different from the information I get from the NDRC in the central government. They are forecasting a shortage in gas supply. Therefore, they are willing to develop any possible technology to increase the gas supply, which includes coal to gas, which is very evil technology to supply gas because the emission from coal to gas is actually larger than just burning coal. So we have to really look into different more information of option 2 because we have a first impression that option 2 should be okay, won't be any problem, should be safe, should be clean. But actually, when you look into it, when you look into the future development of option 2, there are a lot of concerns. So I hope our concern can be answered by either the government or the power company, because there are so many concerns that they give an impression and try to give every consumer in the market to have such an impression that the gas price will be stable in the future, something like that. But actually, as being a consumer, being an electricity user, I think they are, especially for the power company, are in the right position to give us a promise, saying that if you believe that the gas price will be stable in the future, why not promise that you won't increase the tariff in the future? Or giving some promise like the packet store, which give us a promise that they will refund you double for the price difference between the electricity market. That will be very promising commitment if they want to persuade us to go for the option 2 option.
Thank you, Prentice. You can keep the mic. I'm going to give you your 5 minutes.
Okay.
Or you already consumed that?
Not exactly. Because, okay, I keep the mic then. For our positioning as an environmental group, we're really looking forward to what is our vision beyond 2020. Because right now when we are taking consideration to which direction we are going forward, which actually it will lead to a very different future. How can our energy market to be developed? So let's say option 1, then we will merge with a larger region to try to solve our future possible challenge we face, no matter in tariff or in environmental concern. But for option 2, we have to solve it on our own, together with two power companies we are facing. Yeah, so this is actually what we have to really think carefully, because it's so different that, and if we have to learn from other consumers in the world, what is their option? Here I would just like to give you an example. Let's say Google, their data center, what is their choice of electricity? What they look for to the future? They give a promise that their data center will be using 100% renewables by enlarging their grid connection. They want to secure their energy supply through energy power purchase agreement, which is something like the earmark option of renewable energy. the advantage they are proposing through this mechanism is not basically providing an economic incentive for the RE development. They do it for their own interest because they can secure the stability for their future tariff. Everyone can imagine that if you can earmark an renewable energy project for the next 20 years, the cost won't be fluctuating a lot. The cost will be very stable. So this is actually a very reasonable choice for being a consumer to look for your energy option. So why don't we learn from others to make our decision right now? So it's all up to you, and let your imagination go further away from 2020 and go beyond 2020.
Thank you, Prentice. Johnny, you want to respond to
Can I
that?
follow up on
Very
this?
quickly.
I'd just like to follow up on Prentice's point about the RE. Robert mentioned RE in Hong Kong, focusing on solar and wind and all that stuff. But if you think about this, is this all we can get in terms of RE? Let me give you an example. Now, we might not achieve that, but for example, in Korea, they actually have legislation now that requires all the electricity generation companies to provide, I think it's by 2020, 50% of their electricity must come from RE. Now, that's something that seems to be not possible at the beginning in Korea. But then, because of this legislation, then a lot of developments have gone on in the last few years in terms of tidal energy, in terms of other types of renewables and so on, that they're working on in order to meet this target. Now, this is something that we should start thinking about, is have some innovative ways of RE generation. And now it could be initiative from the power companies, or it could be through legislation, or it could be a combination of both. Now, this is not only to the benefit of reducing carbon intensity, but also it will actually spur a whole sector of industry to develop RE. And you know, Hong Kong has lots of brains in many places, and if you have opportunities, if you have business opportunities, there will be people who will come up with solutions to make this happen. And so we need to be a little bit more innovative, like what Prentice and Gavin was saying, is we need to look further into the future as to what is the potential for RE in Hong Kong, and not just focusing on solar and peripheral of wind.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm now going to turn to Jim, and then maybe after that, Robert, you can also respond to that. Jim.
Okay, well, I guess I would like to take the opportunity to draw together some themes from the event today, which I think has been first class. Many people have talked about, actually, it's very difficult to make a decision right now between option 1 and option 2. Folks have talked about, is there an option 3? Could we do things with more data, more understanding? Could we actually do things maybe step by step, is another point that's been made. So what I'd like to talk about, just for the next few minutes if I can, is CLP's view. Now, if you have a look at CLP's response, and this is the document here, freely available from our website, it's in 2 parts. One is our response, and the second part is to address some of the concerns about lack of information. There is a detailed appendix to the document which will have a lot of information around emissions, around costs, and around reliability. So that may help inform the decision people reach as they go forward. But I want to highlight a number of points. I think both option 1 and option 2 have their opportunities and their challenges. Actually, it's not easy to make a simple choice between 1 and 2. And my view is that we don't need to make that definitive all-term, for once and for all decision today. Many folks here have called for more information, more study, more understanding, and I think that's a very sensible approach. Option 1 is, as the government says, untested. Option 2 is something we're more used to. So let's have a think about whether or not there are some opportunities to take things in a step-by-step approach. So we prefer a phased and a flexible approach over the longer term, which allows Hong Kong to benefit from changes in technology, changes in opportunity, changes in fuel prices. Now, by a phased and flexible approach, I don't mean doing both 1 and 2. What I mean quite specifically is that we should get on with studying what option 1 really means right now. So how much low carbon power is genuinely going to be available from the mainland on an additional basis, by when, and at what cost. We should really understand what the impact will be on reliability. How would the interconnection be done? Where would it go? What system, what technology will be used? And actually my suspicion is that that study, because you've got to pick a route, as we said, corridors may be difficult to find, is probably going to take 4 to 5 years. Now in the interim, we've got some pressing needs to improve air quality and climate change targets set by government for 2020. That's not very far away. Now actually we have some pressing targets to meet for next year. So we talked about the carbon emissions in Hong Kong and across in Guangdong. Next year, 2015, is only 7 months away. CLP will have to significantly increase the amount of gas it burns to meet the government's emissions targets. Our carbon footprint next year for CLP, the bulk of generation in Hong Kong, will fall significantly. Gas is half the carbon content of coal. So between 2015 and 2023, which is the earliest date the interconnection is available according to the government, that's quite a long period, almost 10 years. So how are we going to get further improvements between 2015 and 2023? Actually, the emissions caps mean that from next year, I have to run my generation plants that can burn gas at maximum utilisation. I believe HEC will have the same. So I'm already maxing out the gas by 2015. So how do I get improvements in 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23? I can't build any more gas plant. Actually, the flex will have to come from coal. So even if the interconnector is available by 2023, which may be a little bit optimistic, we need to make further progress. So CLP's view is that some initial work should be done on looking at a small number of gas units in Hong Kong to help improve our performance in the short term, whatever the longer term. That also has one other benefit. New modern CCGTs are more efficient than the existing machines. Gas is not a cheap fuel, so you will get some benefits in the sense of that the gas will be used more economically and emissions will be lower per unit. And in some ways that's a no regrets move, because you need good quality local generation. Even in 20 or 30 years time, you're going to have some good local quality generation in Hong Kong. You can't rely on none. So it's, to a degree, a no regrets move. So our view is, start the detailed study work on option 1 right now. Let's get on with it. Let's see what the opportunities really are. Let's understand it better. And then for option 2, let's start on a small number of units to make sure we can keep things improving in the short term. I'll just make one other comment in terms of looking ahead to maybe different approaches. It is difficult for Hong Kong to reach a clear view whether it should do it its own or whether it should work with others. I think in the longer term, there may be opportunities from that new interconnection. If the mainland is able to improve over time its reliability, its carbon footprint, the sources of new energy, then there are opportunities for Hong Kong. But we need to understand what they are, how much they're going to cost, and when they're going to happen. Now, a few comments have been made about, well, let's open the market, let's introduce some competition, somebody said. But Donald has mentioned that the price for option 1 and option 2 is the same. The generation costs for CLP and HEC are determined as much by environmental regulation as anything else. The network bit is not going to be subject to competitive pressure. So basically, you're introducing a new player, CSG, who, by the way, is a monopoly seller. So you now have 3 players. If option 1 is the same price as option 2 local generation, where's the competition? Where's the difference? I don't see there's much value adding. And this comes back to the point I mentioned earlier on. You need to think about what is the best way to achieve the answer to the exam question. The exam question is, how can we improve our air quality? How can we improve our carbon footprint? It isn't an issue of market structure. It genuinely isn't. The two are interlinked, one may flow through into the other, but we really need to think about our task for today. And I think, to conclude, it's important that everybody does make their own submission. You've only got a few weeks left to do it. I know we all say we'll do it next week or the week after because it's important, but I've got something else to deal with today. But time comes up on us very quickly. This will affect the way that generation is done in Hong Kong for the next 20 to 30 years. So everybody should exercise their view and respond. But my approach, CLP's suggested approach, is to think about a phased and flexible one, which gives us the opportunity to lock in options in the future, not lock them out today.
Thank you, Jim.